Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Katie and I am a fourth year first grade teacher, and I'm so glad you're here for today's video. Today's video is going to be about time management tips for teachers. I have gotten a lot of comments and questions on both my YouTube and my Instagram on how to best manage your time as a teacher and how to help keep school at school and keep home at home and not have to mix the two. So I thought I would make a video giving you my best tips. Let me just start off by saying I am not an expert at time management and I am not always good at managing my time. I do get behind and have to stay late and come early, but these are just some tips that I have found that have helped me be a better manager of my time. I'm at a new school this year, so I'm learning new curriculum, I'm learning new school routines, and I'm in a new city. So this year has been like a climb, to say the least, but I am proud to say that I am sitting here today and I am planned ahead for the next 2 weeks. I've even got most of my copies in for the next 2 weeks. So I'm sitting pretty nice right now to give these tips to you guys. Tip number 1 I have for managing your time is to always keep a running to-do list. A running to-do list helps me keep my mind clear because, let's be honest, when there are students in my room, my brain is completely focused on classroom management and teaching and engaging them in the lesson, and I'm not really thinking about what I need to do after school or what I need to do at home, etc. So I always keep a running to-do list of anything that pops into my brain that I think, oh, I need to do that after school, or oh, I need to make sure I get that done, and I jot it down real quick. This year, my to-do list looks like a hard copy, little foldable that I got from Walmart, just with a checklist on it, and every time something pops into my brain like, oh, I should do that, I write it down, like take a picture of my long A activity, send out a PTO reminder, make math journal questions, and then when I finish it, I cross it off. And there's nothing more satisfying than crossing something off to your to-do list. In years past, I have also used Google Keep as my running to-do list. I'll enter a picture of that right here. I just got some freebie headers from, I think, Teach, Create, Motivate, and anytime something popped into my head, I would type it into Google Keep. And this worked really well at my old school because I had a Google Pixel device, and so anytime I opened my device, that to-do list was sitting right there next to my email. So Google Keep is also a really great way to keep those running to-dos. Having that to-do list also keeps me productive during my planning because once the students are out the door and at specials and I come and sit down, it's not like a, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I just look at my checklist and say, oh, okay, I wrote down these things. Let's get started on those. Tip number 2 is to do at least one thing every day to get prepared for the next week. I like to stay at least a week ahead in my plans. That way on Friday, I'm not scrambling to come up with what I'm going to do the next week. But I stretch it out over time. This means that I am constantly doing something during my planning time today to get ready for next week. In my first 3 years of teaching, I kind of developed a groove of what I did on each day. And I finally sat down and typed it up into a weekly tasks document that you will see right here. So this document outlines the things that I do each day. For example, on Monday, I make sure that my reading plans are squared away for the next week. I finish up any whole group slides that I'll need for next week's phonics. And then I also write the math journal questions that we'll need for morning work the next week. On Tuesday, I finish my math plans, and then I prep the homework page that we'll be sending home for next week. On Wednesday, I put in any copies that we're going to need for seat work or for activities. And then I start prepping my reading centers to make sure I have everything laminated and cut that I need. On Thursday, I finish preparing any math games that we're going to need for the next week, and I also assign the science lessons that we're going to be going over on the computer. Then on Friday, every Friday, I reset centers, I put up new high-frequency words, and I sort the copies for the next week into the appropriate drawers. It took me a while to get those grooves and routines down, but if you're just getting started, I would recommend making a list of everything that you do to prep for the next week's lessons, and then kind of just dividing them into days based on the order of importance, or like, for example, you have to finish your plans before you plan out your copies and put those in to be copied. So just make a list of everything you do to prep for a week's worth of lessons and sort them by day, and then start to get that routine and groove going for you. Tip number 3 is to do digital lesson planning. This has been a game changer for me. I have always typed up in my lesson plans, and my first 3 years I used Google Docs to type them because we submitted them on Google Drive, and I had a template that I got on Teachers Pay Teachers for my lesson plans. I will link it down below and kind of show you what it looks like right here. and I always typed my lessons into that weekly format. This year, my school uses Planbook, and I've loved how efficient it is because I can make templates for each lesson block. For example, I can make a template for my reading whole group that's phonemic awareness, phonics, high frequency words, comprehension, and then I can extend that lesson over a couple of days to show that I'm practicing the same skills for each day. Let me show you what my Planbook lessons look like. Here is my Planbook account. I went through and made different classes for each section of my calendar. So I have my Brain Smart Start, a writing class, a reading small group class, special area, reading whole group, lunch, recess, SOAR, which is our intervention, math, science, computer lab, etc. And if I click on go to and classes, that's where that will pop up. So it lets me make a separate class for each subject that I teach. Then within each class, I made a template that repeats week after week. So for example, in my reading small group plans, my template is what am I focusing on at the teacher table? What are we focusing on our seat work? And what are the 4 centers that my students will be completing? My reading whole group template looks different. It's talking about what are we doing for phonemic awareness, for phonics, for fluency, for high frequency words, for our essential question, for comprehension, etc. And then our math looks similar. I've got my session title, and then my template is what's my warm up, my intro, our lesson, and then how are the students going to practice the skill. This lets me just come and fill in this section every week, and the template repeats. So for example, if I went ahead to the week after Thanksgiving, you would see that here's the template empty, and all I have to do is click on the drop down and click edit, and I can edit my lesson. And you can also see where I've been planning ahead a little bit. I've already planned ahead some math plans and entered those in there. If I ever needed to skip a lesson or extend it, I can go down here and click extend. I can delete the lesson. There are just lots of options to make it super easy to customize. So I've really enjoyed getting to use this as a planning tool. Tip number 4 is to batch your plans when you can. If you've never batched lesson plans, that just means sitting down and kind of looking at an entire unit as opposed to just doing a week at a time. I know that sounds confusing because I was just talking about how I do a little bit of planning each day, but when I get a chance to, especially in math, I like to open up the entire unit book and at least plan out how many days I want to dedicate to each session in that unit, and if I have a chance, go ahead and start the plans. For example, the next unit that we're going to be doing in math is a unit on subtraction, and rather than just looking at the next 5 days and what we're going to do in subtraction, I looked at the whole unit in the front of my teacher's edition. Most teacher edition books are going to have something similar, like a chapter at a glance, where it outlines every single session that you would be doing in this unit. So I sit down and I look at that and I say, okay, how many days do I want to work on this first session? How many days do I think it'll take to get through this session? Are there any extra activities I want to add? And I go ahead and plan out, at least outline out the entire unit. That way, the plans are either finished, or if they're not finished, I have a solid outline and I can look and say, oh, okay, these are the sessions that we're doing this week. It takes a while to get to that point because you kind of have to be familiar with the curriculums that you're teaching. But if you're not familiar with the curriculums that you're teaching, this is a great way to familiarize yourself with them instead of just looking at one isolated lesson or 1 week's worth of lesson, looking and seeing what is the big picture here and how can I space that out and organize it to teach my students in a way that's going to make sense to them. So doing that with my old math curriculum and with this new one has really helped me familiarize myself with the curriculum, and it's also a very efficient way to plan because voila, you got a whole unit done, and usually a unit lasts 3 or 4 weeks. My next tip for teacher time management is to organize your files in some kind of online drive. Personally, I use Google Drive, and it has been so nice because I have so many organized folders that anytime I'm lesson planning, it's really easy for me to look back and say, what was that center resource that I used last year? Or did I have any practice passages to practice this long vowel skill? And I can just go click through the folders and find it really quickly. Here's a little mini tour of my Google Drive to show you kind of what I mean by all those folders. This is what my Google Drive looks like. The first school that I taught at was all Google everything, and so every resource that I ever used in teaching, I uploaded into my Google Drive. So I learned how to number the folders to keep them in the same order alphabetically, and then color code them as well. You can change the color by just clicking on the folder, clicking on the ... and changing the color, renaming it, etc. I love the rainbow colors if you couldn't tell from my plan book lessons. So of course, my folders in my drive are rainbow. Using the numbers helps them always stay in the same order because my most frequent folders are up at the top. You'll notice some of them are missing because as I switched schools, some of my documents I didn't need anymore, and I kind of had to trim down because on the free version of Google, you only have 15 gigs of space, whereas on an educator's account that I had earlier, I had like unlimited storage. So I definitely slimmed down my files and got rid of things that I didn't need. So that's why I'm missing some numbers. But when you click inside the folders, like my resources folder is the biggest one that I use, I also have this organized by number and by subject. So I have submitted lesson plans in a folder. I have all of my Google Slides for reading in a folder, anything that I use for virtual learning in a folder, writing, center materials, reading, math, spelling tests, science curriculum, theme days, things that I used for my ELL newbies, homework, and then I have just assorted folders for each school year where those random things that don't really have a folder fit in. Now, not everything's sorted. I always have a couple things down at the bottom, but I really do try to keep it all in folders. So the one that's the most organized, I'd say, is the reading folder because I have all my files sorted by alphabet, comprehension, fluency, grammar, high frequency words, phonics. So if I ever needed something for phonics, I just double click in phonics and I can find the specific category like, oh, here's my CVCE words. That's what we're working on this week. And I have all the files that I've downloaded for that there. So keeping it organized like this in a virtual drive has been super helpful because then I can access my materials from any device. And then my last tip is to know when you work best. I am a morning person. My brain does not function as well in the afternoon after an entire day of school. So if I'm going to get something done and I need to spend a little extra time on it, I'm usually going to spend that extra time in the morning. So for me, that looks like coming about 20 minutes before contract hour almost every day so I can get things ready. But I get so much done that in the afternoons, I'm able to leave right when school's over. Also, if I ever have to put in work on off days or on the weekends, I know that I'm going to wake up and dedicate my morning time to that because that's when I work best, because by the afternoon, I don't want to be thinking about school at all. Sometimes I know you don't get a choice. You really don't get to choose when your planning time is during your schedule, and we have to make the best of whatever planning time we have. But if you ever have a day, or if you're planning on coming early or staying late, think about when are you going to be most productive. I hope those tips were helpful for you. Remember, I'm not perfect at managing my time, and I do schoolwork outside of school sometimes. Guilty. I think everybody's guilty of doing it, whether we want to or not. But those tips have really helped me work on getting ahead with my lesson planning and managing my time at school much better so I'm not sitting at home thinking I should have done this today during my workday. I also wanted to answer some questions that you guys had about time management. I left a Q&A box on my Instagram and my YouTube, so I'm going to answer a couple of y'all's questions about time management as a teacher. Here's the first question. It says, how do you manage time when you become super focused on one lesson? As I mentioned earlier, kind of batching your lessons and looking at an overall unit might be a good place to start because when you make an outline of the unit, that really helps you get a lot accomplished in one sitting, and then you can start to fill in the individual lessons. I think it also just depends on what you're required to do for lesson planning. I know that anytime somebody's going through a college prep program, you have those lesson plans that are like 3 pages long, and those take a long time. So it would be really easy to get swept away doing one lesson. But as you become more experienced as a teacher, you don't have to script out as much anymore unless your school requires it. But if your school doesn't require it, then just think about what do I need to write down on this lesson plan to help me successfully teach it, and that might save you time and you may not have to add as much detail. But do make sure that you're following all of the requirements that your admin gives you as far as lesson planning goes and the details they would like included. The next question says, how do you get your planning and prep done during the week so that you don't have to do it over the weekend? I'm struggling to find balance. Please share any tips because I need my weekend to keep my sanity. Me too, girl, me too. So this one was tricky, and I, again, being totally transparent, sometimes I do work over the weekends, and especially when I was first starting out, my first year teaching, I did a lot of work over the weekends, and then at the beginning of this school year too, since I've switched schools, I was doing a lot of work on the weekends. But hopefully the tips that I shared previously in the video will help you kind of manage the time that you have at school better so you don't have to do as much of that over the weekend. I would also like to say, I know a lot of people say absolutely never work on the weekend, and I'm really not one of those people because sometimes doing work on the weekend is going to set me up to be in a better mind space during the week. So if there is something that I have to get done, I just get it done quickly, and I know that that's going to put me in a way better mood on Monday and going into the next week. And so working on the weekend sometimes for me is an investment in my mental health for the next week, and that's okay. The next question says, how do you find the right balance between content creation, marking and feedback, and emails/office work? Is it ever possible to find a balance of all of the things that we have to juggle in the air at once? I'm not sure. I wish there was a secret answer for this besides for just more planning time during our workday, which would be amazing. But I think my best advice is probably scheduling out when you want to do each thing, kind of like I've been doing with my weekly tasks. Like, when are you going to dedicate to answering emails? Will you do that in the morning or will you do that in the afternoon? When are you going to dedicate to working on lesson plans for the next week? Are you going to do that during your planning? Are you going to do it during your afternoon stretch before you go home? And definitely sorting those into categories. That way you don't sit down and feel like you have all of those things to do at once all the time during the day. You can kind of say, okay, this is my time to answer emails. This is my time when I grade. And that might help you compartmentalize it in your brain. The next question says, how do you use your time wisely and not get distracted by stopping by people's rooms to talk? And this one can be definitely difficult. First off, I never think it's a bad thing to talk with coworkers and to socialize. I think as teachers, we definitely need that because we're with kids and students all day. So I would consider your socializing definitely beneficial because those relationships with your coworkers are so important. I would recommend maybe setting a time limit for the amount of time you will go spend in another teacher's room to talk. Or if somebody's coming by and you're trying to work on something, as tough as it would be, maybe being brutally honest and saying, hey, I'm grading these papers right now. Can I swing by your room in 5 minutes when I'm done? And the last question is, what kind of organizational tool do I use? I already showed you my digital lesson planning on Planbook, but I also have a teacher planner that I use to write down all of my dates. And once I finish planning in Planbook, I print out the plans and put them in here so they're easy for me to reference during the day. I am definitely a paper calendar person. I don't use a digital calendar even though I lesson plan digitally, and sometimes I keep checklists digitally. I like to have that paper calendar to keep all my meetings and dates written down, and they're right in front of me when I need them. Other than planners, I have lots of file folders that I use to sort materials by unit and week. And then I also have my Sterilite drawers that I use to organize papers for the week. So that's what I do on Fridays, is I sort all of the copies that I'm gonna need by day. That way on Monday, I can open up the Monday drawer and everything I need is there. I hope these tips and that Q&A was helpful for you guys, and I hope it gives you some ideas of what you can do to help you manage your time better as a teacher. Remember, there will be some weeks, like this week for me, when you're way far ahead in planning, and there will be other weeks where you're literally planning for the next day, which was me last week. But it's all about finding balance and just making sure that you're using the time that you have at school in a productive way. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I post tons of teaching vlogs, content, ideas, tips, all the things, and I would love to have you join. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.